please visit my website, programtokill.net. Go to Plans and Prices for even more exclusive information. You can also support me now on Patreon. Add me on TikTok. And leave a like and comment.
Hi, Karla.
Hi.
Say hi for the camera.
Hi, camera.
I didn't try to be average, like the average guy. I tried to be larger. I tried to be the best thing that there ever was. Maybe because I needed love. Maybe, I don't know why. I just really tried to be the best for everybody. I wanted to be the world.
Paul Bernardo was convicted for first-degree murder of the schoolgirls Leslie Mahaffy and Kristen French. Karla Homolka got off with 12 years for manslaughter. She was released in 2005. Paul Bernardo was born into an unusual family. His mother, Marilyn, had been adopted early in life by Gerald Eastman, a veteran lawyer, military figure and community leader. Marilyn never found out why. According to her husband, Kenneth Bernardo, she was raped by at least 3 members of the Eastman family after she was adopted. Her husband, Kenneth Bernardo, was the son of an Italian immigrant and a woman of English heritage. Kenneth's father made a very successful life in the marble and tile business, but was abusive to his wife and children. Kenneth did not go into the family business, but became an accountant instead. Kenneth and Marilyn married in 1960 after her father disapproved of her other suitor, who did not have the education that Eastman demanded in a son-in-law. Eventually, Kenneth and Marilyn settled in a nice middle-class neighborhood in Scarborough, Toronto. The marriage did not go well, and Kenneth, like his father, was allegedly physically abusive to his wife. After giving birth to a son and daughter, Marilyn found refuge in the arms of her previous suitor, the man without the education her father had required for his daughter. Thus was Paul Bernardo conceived illegitimately. Paul was later told that his real father was a prominent Canadian businessman. Kenneth was very open-minded about this indiscretion, and in August of 1964, the name Paul Bernardo was listed on the baby's birth certificate. Kenneth had his difficulties as well. He fondled a young girl and went to court for it. He started hanging around the neighborhood at night, peeping into the windows of young women. Then there was Sunday night. Every Sunday, the whole family would settle down in front of the TV to watch Walt Disney, and her mother would lie down with the boys, and her daddy would call her. He would sit there and finger her while they watched Mickey Mouse. Sometimes it hurt, and she would say, "Ouch. What's going on there?" Her mother would ask, but she never did anything. But worst of all, he started to sexually abuse his young daughter. Marilyn put on more and more weight. She became grotesquely obese. Signs of severe depression were very noticeable. She stopped taking care of the home and the children and withdrew into her own world in the basement of the house. Marilyn described her youngest child as very selfish and stubborn. He later suddenly became outgoing and talkative. He joined the Cub Scouts. He started playing baseball in the community house league. Like his sister, Paul started to swim seriously and take lessons at the YMCA. In the end, they both got national lifeguard certificates. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Paul spent as little time as possible inside his parents' home. He forged an early friendship with two neighborhood boys, the Smyrnis brothers, that would last well into his teen years and throughout his married life. When Paul was 16, he got into an argument with his mother, and she told him that her husband was not his real father and showed him a photo of his real father. The effect on Paul was devastating. After that, he openly mocked and taunted his mother, calling her a slob and a whore. Paul began to hate his parents. After that incident with the picture, when Bernardo's mother got mad at her son, she would often yell at him that he was the bastard child from hell. Paul had some unusual characteristics. He would twitch and sniff a lot, and he would stare into space for long periods of time for no apparent reason. In other words, he had a strong tendency to dissociate. Bernardo graduated from Sir Wilfrid Laurier Collegiate Institute, opting to work for Amway, whose sales culture had a deep effect on him. He bought the books and tapes of famous motivational get-rich-and-famous experts. During several of Van Smyrnis and Paul's discussions, Paul allowed Van to see the wall of words he was accumulating in his bedroom. The clipped motivational quotations were neatly stacked in columns of about 5 to 10 words wide, stretching 15 feet or so along the length of the room and 8 feet high up to the ceiling. At first blush, the wall of words might have seemed like just a bunch of sayings that mean everything in general but nothing in specific. Their thrust, in essence, was a combination of capitalism, hedonism, and narcissism without any hint of a soul. It seemed that Paul was programming himself rather than helping his mind to focus. Bernardo read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People by author Dale Carnegie. Ironically enough, Charles Manson as well. The Terry Fox story, 1983, was the first feature film produced by cable broadcaster HBO. Among its unbilled extras, portraying runner number 7, was one Paul Bernardo. Bernardo and his friends practiced their techniques on young women they met in bars and were fairly successful. By the time Bernardo attended the University of Toronto Scarborough, he had developed dark sexual fantasies. Bernardo and other unidentified assailants committed multiple sexual assaults, escalating in viciousness, in and around Scarborough, Ontario. Most of the assaults were on young women whom the perpetrators had stalked after they exited buses late in the evening. The Scarborough Rapist could be your coworker, employer, friend, brother, husband, or son. The location is Scarborough, Ontario. This city of approximately 500,000 people forms the eastern chunk of the municipality of Metropolitan Toronto, Canada's largest city with an estimated population of 3 million. In 1987, a string of serious sexual assaults hit this city and brought an outcry that resulted in increased safety awareness and a push by police to nab a suspect. A composite sketch, given by one victim, was presented to the media. Dubbed the Scarborough Rapist, the suspect in question was an attractive young man with blonde hair. Soon after the sketch was made public, the assault stopped. Other Scarborough Rapist suspects. All of the tips and investigative work resulted in a list of suspects. The lack of an effective case management system makes it impossible to determine whether there were 930 or 1,200 or more of them. About 15 of them stood out as high-interest suspects for one reason or another, and some were put under surveillance. Some looked so good as suspects that they were identified by rape victims as the Scarborough Rapist and arrested, only to be released after they were cleared through further investigation. One of them was called in by a police officer in Waterloo who reported that the suspect always carried a knife and had a lifetime ambition to watch someone die. Another, with a record for kidnapping and sexual assault, was called in by someone who knew him and felt that he would sexually assault again, and was also called in as a look-alike for one of the composites. One of them was reported by a woman who was suspicious of him. He was identified in a photo lineup by a number of women he had followed in the Guildwood area of Scarborough, and he admitted that he had sexual problems. Another was called in as a suspect, and one of the victims thought he was possibly the attacker, but she could not be 100% sure. Another was identified by a confidential informant and arrested, but released after he gave biological samples. Another man, a very good suspect, had been driving around bus stops with his lights off. He carried a knife and aerial photographs of the area in his car and displayed an unusual interest in and knowledge of the Scarborough rape investigations. Another man was called in as a suspect, and then arrested after he was identified in a lineup by one of the victims who said he was the man who attacked her. Scarborough Rapist attack, August 15, 1989. At 12:10 a.m., Taryn described her attacker as a male white in his mid to late 20s, 6 feet, 200 to 210 pounds. He had a muscular build with a pot belly. He had sharp features and a pale complexion, wore a bushy light-colored mustache and cut straight. He looked mean. He spoke without an accent. He was wearing a black leather hat without a peak, a black round-necked sweater, black pants and soft shoes. He was armed with an 8-inch knife. Paul Bernardo could only grow hair on his chin. On December 2, 1987, there were 3 sexual assaults committed by the Scarborough Rapist. Were these all really the work of Paul Bernardo alone? In February 2010, police sources told the Toronto Sun not only did former Colonel Russell Williams and Bernardo both attend the University of Toronto Scarborough campus in the 1980s, but that they were pals and partied together. That friendship is being examined by police, and there's speculation the two may have competed with each other, although the source did not say exactly what that means. Detective Steve Irwin stated that many of the Scarborough victims were stalked extensively before the vicious sexual assaults by the perpetrator. One of the victims even recalled seeing a woman holding a video camera while she was being raped, but police disregarded this information. Police received quite a few reports that the person they were seeking was Paul Bernardo. One had been called in by a bank employee. Another call was received from Tina Smyrnis, the wife of one of the 3 Smyrnis brothers. Even his ex-girlfriends came forward. 1988 January 5th, Bernardo's ex-girlfriend speaks to Sergeant Kevin McNiff. He submits a 3-page report about Bernardo, suggesting he should be considered a suspect in the Scarborough rapes. The McNiff report showed that Bernardo lived in Scarborough and that he was a violent knife-wielding sexual sadist with a pattern of frenzied sexual assaults. It seemed obvious to Sergeant McNiff that he should be investigated as a possible suspect for the Scarborough rapes. There is no apparent record of any contact between the Scarborough investigation and Sergeant McNiff. It appears that there was, from the time he submitted his report until Bernardo was identified 5 years later as the Scarborough Rapist, no attempt to get in touch with him or with his informant. Finally, when the detectives invited Paul Bernardo downtown for an interview, he arrived at the Sexual Assault Squad offices at 4 p.m. Steve Irwin and John Monroe interviewed him in 3A, a special room the Sexual Assault Squad had set up on the 3rd floor. An unusual room in a police building. 3A had subdued lighting. The decor was an early Holiday Inn with a couch, chairs, and a coffee table. It was wired for sound and could be set up for video equipment. Ironically, 3A was most often used to interview the victims of sexual assaults and had been designed to put them at ease. According to one source, a teenage Bernardo flirted with homosexuality before turning himself into a ladies' man. Working briefly in downtown Toronto Boys Town, a 4-block track, he was known as Goldilocks, where he sold himself to older men, including several high-ranking business executives. Perhaps Paul has some compromising photos/videotapes squirreled away? That would be a very Bernardo-ish trick. His ex-girlfriend Jennifer Galligan really wondered about Paul's relationship with the Smyrnis brothers. She thought that Paul wanted to be heterosexual, but that he had real homosexual tendencies. Paul and Van and Steve were always joking around, pushing themselves up against one another. Part of Jennifer's bewilderment came from Paul's strong preference for anal sex. After he took her virginity, he only ever really wanted to do it from behind. That and shove wine bottles into her. She let him do it because she loved him, and because he seemed to get such a thrill out of it. Another girlfriend of Bernardo confessed to police later that once he had driven her and a girlfriend to a house in Markham, a home of the Smyrnis brothers. The girls were taken to the basement of the home, where 2 other young men were waiting. The girls thought they were going to a party. It is the officer's opinion that the men had the intention of having group sex. It was only that the girls wanted to get out, despite threats and assault, and the fact the mother of the house was awoken that this did not occur. According to the officer, the parents of Bernardo and Van Smyrnis do not seem like normal parents in that they allow things to go on in their home that normal parents would not. Bernardo was involved in financial fraud schemes as well as other criminal enterprises. Bernardo often flashed huge rolls of bills, and it was not uncommon for him to carry $10,000 to $15,000. Paul had been smuggling cigarettes with the Smyrnis brothers. Van's parents had moved up north to Sutton, which is a town on Lake Simcoe about an hour's drive from Toronto. They had a small coffee shop at the corner of Highway 48 and Brown Hill. There, the brothers hooked up with a biker named Patrick Johnny. Johnny was a paradise rider. He could finance and fence whatever Paul and the brothers brought across the border. Sometimes, later when he moved to St. Catharines, he made 2 or 3 trips a day. It was as if he had become invisible. The border guard simply did not see him. Van Smyrnis was planning to move to Youngstown, New York, a small town just across the Niagara River. Van was going to open a video store with his brother Steve. Smoking Joe's, the Indians' massive cigarette and liquor outlet, was just up the road. The video store would make a good front for their smuggling business. In 1987, Bernardo met Karla Homolka. They became sexually interested in each other almost immediately. Unlike the other girls he knew, she encouraged his sadistic sexual behavior, also encouraging his acts as the Scarborough Rapist.
Look at how he's scared. Honey, battery's going.
I'm never scared.
Honey,
Yeah?
battery's almost dead.
Is it?
Yeah, flashing battery.
It was the Homolkas who had allegedly turned Paul on to smuggling in the first place. Contraband was a way of life in the Niagara region. Karla Leanne Homolka was the eldest of Karel and Dorothy Homolka's 3 daughters. Her sisters were Lori and Tammy. The family lived in St. Catharines, Ontario. Karel Homolka had a reputation for a wandering eye. When Linda Woolies, one of Dorothy's friends and a colleague from the Shaver Clinic, was in the process of a divorce, Karel came on to her. He started hanging around her apartment building. Once, he managed to get past the security system and pounded on her door, all the while professing his affection. When Linda finally agreed to meet him at a bar to sort things out, Karel announced that he was in love with her and planned to leave Dorothy and move in with her. Carol's nickname among the women at the clinic was the pervert. Linda said he earned it because he always wanted to take you to bed. Dorothy told Linda that she was relieved when Karel went away on business because he always wanted sex. Linda had only tolerated the man for Dorothy's sake. She certainly never encouraged him. It always struck her as odd that the man could hardly speak English after spending more than 3 decades in Canada. The "I'm in loving with you" thing put it way over the top. I told him, "Hey, like I'm in the middle of a divorce. The last thing I want is another man in my life, especially my friend's husband," Linda recalled. She sent Karel home and told him to keep his mouth shut. The next day, Dorothy approached Linda at work. Karel had told her everything, and now she and Linda had to talk. At Linda's apartment that evening, Dorothy said she did not think Karel was in love with Linda, but there was an infatuation. To Dorothy, this meant there was trouble in her marriage, and her marriage was all important to her. "You could save my marriage if you'd sleep with both of us," Dorothy suggested to a startled Linda, who politely but firmly declined. Linda's relationship with Dorothy was never the same. One friend, Renya Hill, said that when she was younger, she was friends with Karla, and the girls spent a lot of time together. One day, Karla was at Renya's house playing and decided that she wanted to see if she could get Renya's pet hamster, George, to fly. Karla constructed a rudimentary parachute out of a pillowcase and strapped George to it. She then threw it from the 2nd story, and obviously George didn't fly. The pillowcase collapsed in on itself, and George plummeted to the ground. It took 2 weeks for George to die after the incident. After he died, Renya buried him. Renya said that after it happened, Karla showed no remorse and looked like she enjoyed the whole thing. A few weeks after Renya had buried George, Karla made her dig up the hamster corpse so she could mess with it. As a kid, friends described Karla as girly and bossy. She was a pretty little girl, and she had a high IQ. Karla was always fascinated by witchcraft, Satanism, the occult, and true crime. Michelle remembers, a book about satanic abuse was one of her favorites. Her friend Amanda remembers that they used to light candles and burn incense all the time. Karla advertised in newspapers for Ouija boards. Another classmate, Lona Brindle, noticed strange carved marks like scarification on Karla's arm. It appeared that circles had been carved into her skin and then filled in with nail polish. Karla also inscribed a book called Michelle Remembers to Lona, published in 1980. It was one of the first true stories about recovered memory, Satanism, and graphic sexual abuse, co-authored by the victim, patient Michelle Smith, and her therapist. Karla's inscription simply read, "There's always something more left to say." Tracy Collins, another friend, saw Karla as a 30-year-old in a 17-year-old's body. One afternoon in the cafeteria, Karla whispered in Tracy's ear, "You know what I'd like to do? I'd like to put dots all over somebody's body and take a knife, and then play. Connect the dots, and then pour vinegar all over them." There was talk about spirits and the screaming tunnels that were located somewhere down near the railway tracks outside of town. The screaming tunnel was a train underpass made of rough-cut stone, almost 5 meters high and 38 meters long, about a 12-minute drive from Niagara Falls, on the outskirts of St. Catharines. It is beneath a railway bed at an isolated spot off Warner Road, not far from the Queen Elizabeth Way. In 1983, David Cronenberg used the location in his film The Dead Zone. According to legend, a young girl had burned to death in the tunnel. Her agonizing screams were said to be audible if one entered the tunnel and then lit a match. According to an old friend of Karla named Amanda, Karla struck many matches in the screaming tunnel and claimed that she heard the horrifying screams after every strike. Amanda did not know where the screaming tunnel was and had never been there. She had only heard about it. Karla took to wearing black, dyeing her hair different colors every other day and changing its style as often. She wore heavy, dark eye makeup. Karla admitted to Dr. Hans Arndt that she smoked a little dope and had once popped an upper called a White Cross, probably contraband Ritalin, in grade 10. She told him that it really made her feel good. But then she crashed and had to call in sick for work at the No. 1 Pet Center in the Penn Center Mall, where she was working part-time. Her mother was not aware of any illicit drug use, just drinking at home with friends. Karla inscribed Lynn Cretney's yearbook. "Remember, suicide kicks and fasting is awesome. Bones rule. Death rules. Death kicks. I love death. Kill the fucking world." Lynn never figured that one out. Homolka's best friend as a teenager, Debbie Dalgleish, once recalled Homolka telling her about being sexually assaulted by a cousin at a young age. Asked later about this episode by a psychiatrist, Homolka said the cousin was seeking only a kiss. Homolka would send her friends strange keepsakes from the animal clinic that she worked at. She gave one friend the claws from a cat that she had declawed at the clinic and sent another friend a card with the severed tail of a puppy taped onto it. The puppy had been cosmetically altered as a show dog. She called it a sick joke. All of Karla's close girlfriends looked the same. The three of them, Kathy Wilson, Debbie Purdy, and Lisa Stanton, were around 5'5", 110 pounds with permed blonde hair. They dressed a little punk, although pop culture in a town such as St. Catharines was ignorant of Iggy Pop, Lou Reed, or even Sid Vicious and the Sex Pistols. Soon, they would form a little clique called the Exclusive Diamond Club. Its charter was simple: recruit rich, slightly older men who were hunks, get a diamond, marry and live happily ever after. Karla was the tough one in the bunch, as Kathy Wilson put it. Karla had a pair of real handcuffs, with keys and everything, ostensibly because she wanted to become a police officer. Me and my bestest buddies Vicky and Lisa. Poor Lisa's been crying over Tom. What am I planning? There's the devilish glint in my eye. June 21st, 1984.
She was the tough one of the of our friendships, and you didn't want to get in a fight with Karla because she was going to win.
Leader or follower, Ms. Homolka?
Leader.
Leader.
Yeah.
Definitely.
They had a little dog chain too, like a dog necklace with the little spikes on, not spikes, but little.
A dog collar.
Dog collar. And
that she wore.
Very submissive.
And interestingly enough, you'd walk into a room and in the back door would be a lace teddy and a pair of handcuffs.
Did she talk about this in a horrible way, like I hate this kind of sex we're having?
No.
What did she say about it?
It was just matter of fact.
It was just the best thing in the world.
There she is, ladies and gentlemen. The sexiest girl in the world. So what are you doing tomorrow, little girl?
I'm going to Disney World in Uncle Ball.
Do you like Disney World?
I don't know if I do it yet.
You don't know?
But I will.
You will? Do you want to meet Mickey Mouse?
Karla's lifelong infatuation with Walt Disney, Disney World, and particularly that Disney institution, Mickey Mouse, troubled the Montreal psychologist Hubert van Gijsegem. That Karla was still decorating her room later in House 10 at Joliet with such juvenilia was, like Freud's cigar, symbolic of something. Dr. van Gijsegem could not quite put a finger on it, but there was something, suggestive, nefarious evil, as were her reading habits and her persistent use of the surname Teal. Another hobby of Homolka is of historical interest. Karla was also very interested in photography. Psychiatrist Chris Hatcher wrote in a 1995 report. She recalls that she took so many pictures. Her mother had to place limits on further film purchases. Karla's boyfriend Doug moved to Kansas. In defiance of her parents, she purchased a plane ticket and surreptitiously flew to Kansas for 2 weeks. On her first flight beyond her parents' control, Karla told Dr. Arndt that she and her boyfriend did cocaine. Just a little, and Karla lost her virginity. According to what the boy in Kansas later told the police, and what Karla told Dr. Arndt, there was nothing unusual about the sex. It was just sex. But she later told her girlfriends tales of sadistic orgies, with bondage and hard spankings. Karla's father routinely referred to her mother as bitch in front of the kids, as in I'm home bitch, etc. Bernardo carried on the tradition with Karla by regularly saying things like go get us some beer bitch at family gatherings. Bernardo told his wife's parents, who have been interviewed, that he was involved in a secret project. On their first date, they saw the movie Prince of Darkness, University Students Release Satan, says one video guidebook, then went to her parents' house in St. Catharines, Ontario, where they had sex in her bedroom, Bernardo said. She had handcuffs on the bedposts of her bed, and the first thing that she wanted me to do was handcuff her, hands, behind her back. And she told me I could do anything with her. And she was the prisoner and stuff like that, Paul later testified. He was always popular with girls, a hunk, Bernardo's father said. But he changed when he met Karla Homolka. How? He kowtowed to her. Paul was usually the boss, but when she called, he went. Dr. Angus MacDonald. Karla Homolka remains something of a diagnostic mystery. There is a moral vacuity in her which is difficult, if not impossible, to explain. Karla's best friend named Kathy became engaged with a man named Alex Ford. Alex was a Freemason and a U.S. Marine drill team member, and who happened to have met Queen Elizabeth II during one of his team's performances for her. Alex Ford offered to sponsor Paul at the Seymour Lodge in St. Catharines, a lodge that had a lot of younger General Motors workers. But as it turned out, 2 local members met Paul and agreed to sponsor him. After he joined, Paul took great delight in performing the secret handshake with Alex Ford, and he got a Mason's ring. Paul also thought it would be a good way to make business contacts. At his first or second meeting, Paul took notes. At conception, the programming phase occurs in which the genetic components gather information from actual experiences of the external environment, and the process repeats itself. Seeing into the future is merely viewing the past, which is accessible through the unconscious mind. Karla was delighted. His Masonic notes read like her books about the occult. Dr. David Wade, the vet who owned the Martindale Clinic, was a Mason. Karla's parents' best friend, Don Mitchell, was a Mason. The father of victim Kristen French, named Doug French, was also a Freemason. It may be of interest to know that during the time of investigation, the then Toronto Police Chief William Joseph McCormick was a Mason.
John Young lived behind Bernardo and Homolka in Port Dalhousie. He also knew Bernardo from the Masonic Lodge. Bernardo had joined the Masons. Young described the Masons as a fellowship of mature men. That brought a burst of laughter from courtroom spectators and members of the jury. Even Bernardo seemed to get the joke, smirking and shaking his head.
One interesting story Alex Ford related to Paul about his time with the Marine Corps that continues to haunt him to this day. It was an incident that involved watching a snuff movie. One day during infantry training school, a small group of Marines were sitting around chatting, and a corpsman was talking about a film he'd seen that showed a woman being killed after orally gratifying a man. A lot of us, we didn't know what he was talking about. So he asks, "Have you guys ever heard of snuff films?" Alex recalls, "No. What the hell is a snuff film? I mean, the only snuff I knew was from Copenhagen." Alex and the others razzied the man after he explained just what a snuff film was. They told him he was full of it and that no such film existed. The corpseman insisted that there was a film and he had a copy, and they should see it because there is a lot of sickness in the world, and it would make them tougher if they understood just what the world had to offer. Of course, we're all thinking, yeah, cool. That was the general sentiment until the guys in Alex's unit watched the grainy, poor-quality video showing a woman shot in the head with a revolver. Later, the recruits confided to each other that they'd been sickened by the film and disturbed by its contents. This was the film I saw, so I told Paul about this. Paul was really into it. He was like, wow, really? That's so cool. He thought it was so cool how they could waste people on movies. On September 25th, 1989, Karla began work at the Thorold Veterinary Clinic in Thorold, a small city adjacent to St. Catharines. She worked in Thorold until December 4th, 1989. Karla said neither she nor the animals were treated properly at the clinic. I didn't like the way that the veterinarian was treating the animals, and second of all, I wasn't being allowed to perform the duties that I was told I would be performing when he hired me. Karla says she quit, offering to give 2 weeks' notice, but was immediately released. Karla later acknowledged she was suspected of stealing drugs from the clinic in Thorold, but maintained she quit because of the way animals were treated. He was very cruel to them. I would not work for a man like this, Karla said of her boss. In a letter to a girlfriend, Debbie Purdy, Karl complained about a veterinarian, Janet, saying she was bitchy. I bitched right back at her and she apologized. She's damned lucky she did. Karl was also accused of robbing the clinic of an anesthetic used on cats. In humans, the medication can produce effects such as hallucinations and is considered similar to phencyclidine, PCP, commonly referred to as angel dust. Every Christmas, Karla helped her mother, Dorothy, sew stuffed bunny rabbit toys to sell in the gift shop at the Shaver Clinic where Dorothy worked. They also made Santa Claus dolls. The Homolka Santas had long faces and big beards. When the beard was lifted, a big penis dropped down. Dorothy's colleagues had always wondered about the propriety of flogging well-endowed Kris Kringles to chronic care patients. By 1990, Bernardo was spending large amounts of time with the Homolka family, who liked him. He was later engaged to the eldest daughter and flirted constantly with the youngest one. He had lost his job as an accountant and instead was smuggling cigarettes across the nearby U.S.-Canadian border.
Largely here, I think that most people here are afraid to get photographed. I think it's just common paranoia.
Bernardo knew they were staring at him. He loved the way his presence ushered out all the little teeny boppers on the street where Karla lived. On Dundonald Street, they called him the neighborhood heartthrob, the big city boy with the killer good looks. Some of the teeny boppers were friends of Karla's sister Tammy, and they always found an excuse to visit her whenever he was there. Bernardo enjoyed their adulation. He encouraged it, always talking to them, at times even flirting with the girls who were at least 10 years younger than him. Paul and his harem, that's what one of the neighbors had said, teasing him about cradle robbing. He laughed it off. Since Bernardo had moved to St. Catharines in February 1991, for one reason or another the police in Niagara had run him through CPIC 17 times. Shortly after moving to St. Catharines, he raped a young woman on Henley Island within a mile of his new home in St. Catharines. The Henley Island rape was an exact carbon copy of the Scarborough Rapes. It was so strikingly similar that an experienced investigator familiar with the details of the Scarborough Rapes and the Henley Island Rapes would immediately recognize them as the work of the same predator. The victim in the Henley Island attack also reported threatening phone calls.
We have these stalking behaviors that positively ID'd him as the stalker. And on the other hand, we have concrete being analyzed by professors and all kinds of other gurus of concrete, but nobody says, well, gee, there's been a slew of bizarre sex crimes in Niagara region, and maybe stalking behavior is where we should start. It frustrates me and perplexes me because you know how good they are with traffic tickets and how they can run your entire life history on their computers.
From the time Paul Bernardo had taken up residence at the Homolka house in late 1990, there were a series of strange, disturbing, violent sex crimes that were most unusual for the area. In the Niagara region, crime was the purview of biker gangs and organized crime, and had more to do with money laundering, drugs, and vendettas than sex. Over the 1990 Christmas holiday, a young, Divorced woman named Crystal Connors was raped and murdered. Crystal was petite and pretty and looked 10 years younger than her 28 years. She met her killer in a Port Dalhousie bar Paul Bernardo frequented. After raping and killing her, the murderer set Crystal and her apartment on fire. The apartment was in Port Dalhousie. Neighbors noticed the smoke early that morning and called the fire department. Forensic investigators found more than one set of semen stains on Crystal's sheets, drew their obdurate conclusions about promiscuity, and Crystal's violent and ignominious end faded into obscurity. Bernardo had become obsessed with 15-year-old Tammy Homolka. Karla helped Paul break the Venetian blinds in Tammy's bedroom so he could make videos of Tammy undressing at night. That summer she and Paul had started to have sex in the afternoons on Tammy's waterbed. They found Tammy's dildo in her drawer, and Paul used it on Karla while she pretended to be Tammy. She pretended to be Tammy and used it on herself while he masturbated.
Okay.
In July, Bernardo took Tammy across the border to get beer for a party. While there, Bernardo told his fiancée. They got drunk and began making out. There was even some talk that Tammy had sex with him that summer. There was an obvious undercurrent of jealousy between the sisters. There were many occasions that Tammy and her girlfriends believed their drinks, when served by Karla and Paul, might have been spiked. One night Tammy's friends, Norma Tellier and Tricia Coyle, slept over, and the threesome decided to play detective. Most of the time Karla kept her room locked, but that night they found it open. They sneaked in and went through Karla's hope chest. They found a strange bag of white powder. Now Tammy was scared. She called Tricia the next day. What if her sister and Paul were trying to do something to her? Tammy also said, "I'm starting to get really scared. I don't understand this." 6 months before their 1991 wedding, Karla stole the anesthetic agent halothane from the clinic. On December 23, 1990, Homolka and Bernardo administered sleeping pills to Tammy in a rum and eggnog cocktail. After Tammy was unconscious, Homolka and Bernardo undressed her, and Karla applied a halothane-soaked cloth to her sister's nose and mouth. Most disturbingly, in her stupor, Tammy Lynn announced that she was sure that Paul and Karla were trying to poison her. Karla was at first shocked and then totally surprised and then somehow emboldened when the girls' imprecations went right over her parents' heads.
Alright, wait, what are you drinking there?
Ice.
Ice? Ice, baby, to go?
No.
Okay, let's see what's up. We have the television and we have La Karla drinking and La Lori, which is absolutely not drinking.
Karla wanted to give Tammy's virginity to Bernardo for Christmas. According to Homolka, Bernardo was disappointed by not having been Karla's first sex partner. With Tammy's parents sleeping upstairs, the pair videotaped themselves as they raped her in the basement. Tammy began to vomit. The pair tried to revive her, then called 911, but not before they hid evidence, dressed Tammy, and moved her into her basement bedroom. A few hours later, Tammy Homolka was pronounced dead at St. Catherine's General Hospital without having regained consciousness. When the police came, 2 senior officers on the scene went with Tammy. They left Constable David Weeks, a rookie with Paul, Karla, and Lori. Constable Weeks found the situation suspicious. He sat Paul, Karla, and Lori on the couch. He suggested to them that they might have been freebasing cocaine, even though Paul had told him outright, before Weeks said anything, that there were no drugs involved. What else could have caused that unholy burn on Tammy's face? Constable Weeks wondered.
I was just wondering from Van, I guess, how much you were friends, how much drugs or alcohol, or was there no, he was just psycho and
oh yeah, he drank a lot, and he was also, from what I remember, in the last 3 months before he got arrested, he was growing marijuana in his basement.
Yeah, but when you guys were palling around, you palled around a long time.
Yes.
I mean, tell me about his social habits. Was he a drinker, mostly?
Drank all the time.
Drugs or no drugs?
Yes, he smoked up a lot. Yes, all the time.
Okay.
And I've heard that he also did cocaine.
Okay.
Although Tammy had not been pronounced dead until they got her to the hospital, she had actually died around 1 a.m. in the Homolka basement. Weeks believes he told Constable Mitchell that he felt it was unusual that the parents were not made aware of the occurrence until emergency personnel arrived. Weeks advised Constable Mitchell that he felt Paul Bernardo had overreacted to the news of Tammy Lynn Homolka's death. The next day at noon, Dorothy asked neighbor/coworker Lynn McCann to go with her and Karel and help them pick out a casket. Karel asked Karla to go, too, but Karla told him to fuck off. Lynn had lost an infant child and found the whole casket thing very difficult. It was all the more unsettling that Dorothy and Karel didn't cry or show any emotion at all throughout the 3-hour ordeal. When they were done, Lynn was exhausted and went home for a while. She suggested that Dorothy lie down, too, and try to get some rest. Later, when Lynn came back, Dorothy told her they laid down, but instead of resting, she and Karel screwed. McCann was flabbergasted when Dorothy told her that somebody had come by and dropped off a death certificate. Tammy's body was barely cold, and they had already concluded her death was accidental? Dorothy Homolka had given McCann 3 different explanations concerning the burn on Tammy's face, at 3 different times. First, she had said it was because Tammy had bad acne, an allergic reaction to a particular kind of makeup. Then she said it was the result of excessive mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And thirdly, because the paramedics had dragged Tammy across the carpet. Where am I going to get the money from? McCann knew it was a rhetorical question and said nothing. Maybe from my brother. It was if Dorothy were talking to herself. We might have to mortgage the house. This immediately suggested to Lynn that the Homolka's house was paid for, making them better off than almost everybody Lynn knew. Lynn was not quite sure what Dorothy needed money for. She assumed it was for legal fees or bail, or something like that. But it was not the first time that Dorothy had obsessed about money on the cusp of a tragedy. There had been a lot of inappropriate wailing and gnashing of teeth about money when Tammy Lynn had died. Then, a couple of months after the funeral, after Paul and Karla had moved out, Dorothy and Karel seemed to have all kinds of money. Karel got a new van. Dorothy got a new car. Dorothy revised her original story about being broke and told Lynn that she had forgotten that they had between $20,000 and $30,000 saved. Tammy was buried December 27, 1990. Karla was acting very strangely at Tammy's funeral. It was an open coffin. She would not leave Tammy's hair alone. She kept straightening the corpse's clothes. Everyone was suspicious. The paramedics had said the washing machine was going when they arrived at the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. It was said that Paul and Karla had washed all of Tammy's clothes. There were rumors about Paul and Karla freebasing cocaine. Constable Weeks had found the movie in the basement video player only half viewed, which he found suspicious since Bernardo and Homolka and Tammy had gone into the basement at 11 p.m., and the movie was not completely viewed 2 hours and 20 minutes later. On January 22, 1991, a senior officer with the Niagara Region Police Department ordered items taken from the Homolka home, including clothing, destroyed even though the case hadn't been formally closed. Tammy's cousin, Kristen Homolka, said, "Our family always thought there was something odd about the way she died. We were never really satisfied with the coroner calling it an accident. She was a good athlete, an excellent soccer player, very healthy." The pair later subsequently videotaped themselves with Karla wearing Tammy's clothing and pretending to be her. In 2001, the magazine Elm Street published an article in which it implied that forensic evidence proved that Tammy's death was not an accident and that her sister had deliberately administered an overdose of halothane. The magazine described Karla as a malignant narcissist who was so incensed by her fiancé's attraction to her sister that she took steps to remove Tammy from his affections permanently. This photograph was taken from Tammy Lynn's coffin by police during her exhumation in the summer of 1993. Karla's parents instructed the police not to return the photograph to the coffin.
I know it was a Christmas present. That was part of a Christmas present. But she also told me that if you didn't do this, you're not having your wedding.
Because Paul wanted a virgin and Karla wasn't. Yeah. So that really bothered him. So
this was her wedding present.
This was her way of saying, here's your virgin, Paul.
She did this to keep Paul to marry her?
That's what she told us.
That's what she told us.
Shortly after Tammy Homolka's funeral, her parents went out of town, and Lori visited her grandparents in Mississauga, leaving the house empty. On the weekend of January 12, 1991, according to author Stephen Williams, Bernardo abducted a girl, took her to the house, and raped her while Homolka watched. Afterward, he dropped her off on a deserted road near Lake Gibson. Bernardo and Homolka referred to her simply as January Girl. A letter from Karla to her best friend Debbie Purdy. "Fuck my parents. They're being so stupid. Only thinking of themselves. My father doesn't even want us to have a wedding anymore. He thinks we should just go to City Hall. Screw that. We're having a good time. If he wants to sit at home and be miserable, he's welcome to. He hasn't worked except for one day since Tammy died. He's wallowing in his own misery and fucking me. Bernardo and Homolka later moved out of the Homolka house to a rented Port Dalhousie bungalow.
So just before they get married, and before Leslie Mahaffy was kidnapped, 2 weeks before, she did exactly to Jane Doe what she did to her sister, rendered her unconscious with a mixture of halothane and halcyon, and she calls her fiancé on his car phone and says, "Come home, dear, I have a surprise for you."
On June 7, 1991, Homolka invited the teen, referred to as Jane Doe in the ensuing trials, for a girls' night out. After an evening of shopping and dining, Homolka took Jane Doe to 57 Bayview Avenue, Port Dalhousie, and began to ply her with alcohol laced with halcyon. After Jane Doe lost consciousness, Homolka called Bernardo to tell him his surprise wedding gift was ready. They undressed the girl, who was a virgin, and Bernardo videotaped Homolka as she raped the girl before he did.
Yeah, you look at them. Yeah, they're the best. All right. Do you like those? They're good, eh?
Buddy, don't eat that.
What's he eating? Don't eat the paper, bud. It's the bones for you.
Just like a kid, a baby. They open the front like...
Buddy, sit.
He doesn't want to spot on it.
Isn't that beautiful?
After Tammy's death, the pair invited many of Tammy's friends over to their house in Port Dalhousie. Like Norma Tellier, overloaded them with expensive gifts, drinking and smoking marijuana, then later making sexual advances to them. On Friday, June 14, 1991, Leslie Mahaffy went out for the evening with her friends and stayed out well past her curfew. At 2 a.m., she found herself locked out of her house. She encountered Paul Bernardo, who was prowling around the neighborhood looking for license plates to steal. He pulled a knife on Leslie and forced her to go in his car. Paul took his catch home. While Karla slept, he began to videotape the 14-year-old Leslie naked and blindfolded. When Karla woke up, she was very angry that Paul had used their best champagne glasses to entertain his new toy.
Oh, and I was really mad too because when I took Buddy out, there were 2 champagne glasses on the dining room table. And we had these really expensive champagne glasses from France, which we never used. He had those out. The 2 of them had been drinking champagne from those glasses. And I was really mad. It was a stupid little...
Leslie Mahaffy told Karla Homolka her name, and she said she wanted to leave so she could attend her friend Chris Evans' funeral. They discussed his death, and Karla seemed interested. She asked for more details about the accident, having read some of it in the papers. There has always been much speculation of who did the killings. Bernardo claimed that he had always intended to free the girls he and Homolka had held captive. Bernardo claimed that Homolka was worried that Mahaffy's blindfold had fallen off, and that she would be able to identify them. Further, Bernardo claimed that Homolka's plan was to murder Mahaffy by injecting an air bubble into her bloodstream, eventually causing an embolism. Homolka claimed that Bernardo strangled her. Homolka and Bernardo married on June 29, 1991, in an elaborate wedding held at the Niagara-on-the-Lake Church. Bernardo had been in control of the wedding plans, which included the 2 riding in a white horse-drawn carriage with the bride dressed in an expensive white gown. Wedding photo of the Bernardo clan, June 29, 1991.
Hi, Karla. Hi, Paul. Best of luck. I love you both. Paul is the best thing that could ever happen to Karla.
On the same day they married, they found Leslie's body encased in blocks of cement in Lake Gibson. I remembered seeing an old documentary on YouTube way back about satanic cults. It stated that disposing of a victim encased in cement is also a method used in cult sacrifices. And it is also done by organized crime members. Paul and Karla had a hell of a time on their honeymoon in Hawaii. They made a video record, footage from the airplanes as they island hopped, combined with some stalking scenes, as well as many interludes with Paul and Karla having fun in their hotel rooms. They caught some crabs by the seashore and brought them back to their room. I killed one. Show them the one I killed, Karla demanded. grinning at the hotel's sink full of the remaining live crabs.
I just want to tell you that the beauty of this ocean, of this beach, of everything here, doesn't even come close to equaling the love that I feel for you.
A newspaper clipping found later during the search of the Bernardo house described a rape that occurred in Hawaii during the couple's honeymoon there. The presence of the article, the rape's similarity to Bernardo's modus operandi, and its occurrence during the Bernardo's presence led police to speculate on the couple's involvement. Law enforcement officials on both sides of the border have stated their belief that Bernardo and Homolka were responsible for this rape. Jane Doe was invited back to Port Dalhousie in August, this time to spend the night. Jane Doe stopped breathing after she was drugged and Bernardo had begun to rape her. Homolka called 911 for help, but called back a few minutes later to say that everything is all right. The emergency crew recalled without follow-up. Occasionally, Paul encouraged Karla to go out on the front lawn at 3 in the morning and strip. He would watch from the window and masturbate while Karla danced around, bumping and grinding, stark naked on the street. If the neighbors saw it, nobody ever complained.
Okay, maybe there might be another time. Wow.
Bernardo even wandered the house alone at night, filming every room, zooming in on pictures of his dead sister-in-law.
Bernardo was starting to think about a career in rap music, about how he could become the next big, white rapper like Vanilla Ice. Upstairs in the music room that no one was ever allowed to enter, Paul had an 8-track mixing board, a pre-editing computer system, and thousands of dollars worth of recording equipment, including a CD recording unit. In mid-1991, Paul started recording his own CDs, taking tracks from rap records and mixing them with others. Paul said that he intended to cut an album, combining pirated rap tracks with his own original hybrid mix. Without a band and with little musical talent, Paul was trying to become a rap star. Essentially, it was a variation on the motivational tape scam. Nevertheless, the cuts were truly of professional quality.
Ever get caught? No, never. Why? You know, if they say, did you ever get caught? No, never. Why? They say, I'm a deadly innocent guy. You ever get caught? Did you ever get caught? Did you ever get caught? No, never, never. Why? I'm a deadly innocent guy. So keep on fronting, man. You fronting and you ride like you tough, man. You ain't been where I've been, man. You ain't seen what I've seen. You ain't at where I'm at, man. So this is not replacing Stick Up Kid, okay? Deadly Innocence is the theme song, the title track to the album. And it's basically establishing my street credibility. This is a more of a, you know, you're hardcore battling the world through your ways of getting your illegal money or whatever you're doing. And you use everything, all your feelings, and the real life feelings you all experience, including everything you experience in all the smuggling and all the other activities to make a buck on the street, which is important, and that establishes your street credibility. So come at me. I got a nice face. I look like a pretty boy, man. I come back with my b-boy hat looking like I'm 13 years old. I'll kick your ass and blow your head out. I'll kill your parents out there, man. I'll kill your sister. I'm a solo creep. I make the girls weep, acting out my crimes while the others sleep.
Paul always had a wad of money on him, but most people in his close circle never quite figure out where he got it. He was always full of schemes, but he was also secretive to an extreme. Bernardo told Lori Homolka once if she ever needed someone killed, he knew people who would do it and nobody would be the wiser. On the day of the arrest, the police learned from Michael Stephen Donald, a friend of Bernardo's, that Bernardo said he had a videotape of Homolka having sex with women and a video of Homolka killing Tammy. And Bernardo added, "You don't keep it. You don't stash it in the place of guilt," and said he had it off premises because he had a lot of friends in the city. On the afternoon of April 16, 1992, Bernardo and Homolka were driving through St. Catharines to look for potential victims. As they passed Holy Cross Secondary School, they spotted Kristen French, a 15-year-old, walking briskly to her nearby home. The couple pulled into the parking lot of nearby Grace Lutheran Church, and Homolka got out of the car, map in hand, pretending to need assistance. As French looked at the map, Bernardo attacked from behind, brandishing a knife and forcing her into the front seat of their car. From the back seat, Homolka controlled the girl by pulling down her hair. According to Bevan's report, all the eyewitnesses said the abductors drove a Camaro. It was cream-colored. They said, Paul and Karla were driving a gold Nissan when they apparently abducted Kristen. As the news from St. Catharines filtered down to the general public, tipsters called police with reports of suspicious vehicles. Apparently, a brown van had slowly followed a girl on Cecil Drive. Its driver had been looking at the girl the entire time. Police were most interested in reports of a blue van with white wing mirrors that had been spotted 3 times that afternoon, once at Holy Cross High School, once at Orchard Park School, and another time between the 2 schools. Other rumors had linked Terry Anderson's disappearance with a blue van as well. Some schools in North St. Catharines recently sent home a note to parents warning them that a blue van or car might be cruising the area. The note stated that occupants of this vehicle may be trying to entice children inside, said Terry Robbins, who received one of the notes. 2 men abducted French may have stalked her, police say. Initial reports stated Kristen French was stalked by 2 men in a car before she was abducted. 1983 rape shows similarities to French case. Police urge mystery caller to tell more about Kristen. Police speculated that Kristen French might have been stalked and that the abduction was planned rather than spontaneous. Inspector Vince Bevan first concluded lividity markings on Kristen for signs of ritual abuse, precipitated a call to an expert in satanic cults. Bernardo and Homolka videotaped themselves as they tortured, raped, and sodomized Kristen French, forcing her to drink large amounts of alcohol and to behave submissively to Bernardo. When Kristen French's body was found, police believed the well-preserved state of the body suggested that she had been alive until then a few days ago, held captive for at least a week and a half by the couple. A friend of Paul named Mark, pseudonym, said that when he was later interviewed by the police, they told him he was actually on 3 separate occasions in the house partying during Kristen French's captivity. I knew he had a soundproof room in his house. We wondered if that's where Kristen was kept. Gord Cowan from Dundonald Street, resident near where Karla Bernardo grew up. Bernardo, I kidnapped and raped, but I didn't kill. Homolka testified at her trial that Bernardo had strangled French for exactly 7 minutes while she watched. Bernardo said Homolka beat her with a rubber mallet because she had tried to escape, and that French ended up being strangled on a noose tied around her neck secured to Karla's hope chest. When confronted on the witness stand under cross-examination during Paul Bernardo's trial in 1995, Karla had no explanation for these anomalies in the various pathologist reports. To this day, the subcutaneous symmetrical bruises on Leslie Mahaffy's back and the aspirated blood in Kristen's lungs remain stubborn mysteries. Around the time of one of the kidnappings, the vet lab that Homolka used to work at was burglarized. Various drugs, anesthetics, surgical tools, etc. were stolen, apparently for use on the victims. The lab mysteriously burned down after the body was found. Karla Homolka encountered a distressing problem shortly after she helped torture and kill Kristen French and Leslie Mahaffy at the home she shared with Paul Bernardo in Port Dalhousie. The house became haunted. I was very worried, Homolka discloses in a chilling 1,048-page transcript. A lot of strange things were happening in my house. I kept hearing Paul call my name, and he kept saying, no, he was not calling my name. Bangs were coming from the basement, which Paul heard as well as myself. Homolka said she was so worried that she solicited advice from a psychic named Lori about how to exorcise the restless spirits. Lori suggested pouring ammonia down all the drains and then asking the spirits to leave the house. Homolka did so. I didn't really believe it, but I was ready to try anything. Plus, ammonia is good for cleaning drains, and that is how I rationalized it to Paul, the ever-practical Homolka said. And for a while, the exorcism seemed to work. For a short time, nothing seemed to happen, she related. Then, noises started happening again, and voices started happening again. And I want to stress that Paul heard the noises as well. It wasn't just me. Mark DeMarco is a small, sturdily built Italian, 43 years old, with a certain self-conscious macho edge. DeMarco owns a pawn shop in Niagara Falls. He has the largest collection of Evel Knievel memorabilia in the world. His shop is truly an amazing place. Above all, DeMarco knows what's going down in Niagara Falls and St. Catharines. But I was also warned that he's given to hyperbole. Mark once told me, author Stephen Williams, he knew a beautician from Dart's funeral home, where Kristen French was prepared for burial. He said the beautician claimed Kristen's head had been shaved and her tendons cut, a sure sign of satanic ritual abuse. I did not believe this, but as always with DeMarco, I was fascinated by the unorthodox pitch of the man's mind. When he first entered Buddy's, I immediately wondered what was in his bowling bag. This guy was no bowler. Looking around furtively, he had unzipped the bowling bag and pulled out the most sinister human skull I have ever seen. "Keep it below the table," he had whispered. Once again I was stunned by DeMarco. The skull was small and obviously old. It looked to be the head of a young girl. The jawbone was held in place by a single strand of 12-gauge black wire. It had a kind of yellowish sheen, as though it had been coated with shellac. And it was literally covered with elaborate, precise etchings, a plethora of hand-carved signs such as swastikas and a cross made from a series of squares. Dates such as 1717 and 1871. The etchings were blackened, so the skull looked as if it had been elaborately tattooed. There were symbols such as an eye within an isosceles triangle and words in capital letters, such as Blue Power Druid, incomprehensible phrases such as No Catro or FQHAT or Cali, YUGA and others, such as By the Sign I Will Conquer. No yellow. No red, no black, no. Women only pure. Pure men in control dogma. Novus Ordo SEC. Which meant New World Order. No catro I recognized as a homophobic warning from the Greek katro for homosexual. The others were obvious messages of zero tolerance. But what did blue mean? And why were Druid and Kali, a Hindu god, cut into a cranium along with 666, the mark of the beast? In the occult, numbers have significance, which explains why they were all over the skull. 1357, but not what they meant. And words and names such as Moloch, Vedas, Sumerian, Kabbalah. The skull was just covered with stuff such as this, obviously chiseled with a steady, fastidious hand. In and of itself, a human skull is unsettling. This one was very disturbing, and definitely some kind of ritual talisman. I couldn't take my eyes off it. It's Masonic, DeMarco had said. He told me this old guy came into his shop all the time. He said he was a Masonic historian, and he brought in this big, coffee table-size book with a title something like Hermetic Masonic Rosicrucian Lore and Mysteries. It was violently colored and had all these weird signs and symbols. The guy said it helped him understand the markings on the skull. According to him, the skull was a totem that had belonged to a splinter lodge in the southern United States, and it had been carved sometime after 1871. DeMarco remembered what the old man said about the name Moloch. Because it was eerie and apropos, Moloch was the name of the divinity to whom the people of Judah in the last ages of the kingdom had sacrificed their own children. Mark DeMarco wanted me to buy the skull of a sacrificed child for $5,000. Mark DeMarco had all kinds of Masonic conspiracy theories. He spoke of ritual satanic cults and human sacrifices in the area. A former St. Catharines businessman has accused police officers investigating alleged wrongdoing within the Niagara Regional Police Force of using illegal wiretaps themselves. I have information that police connected to this inquiry themselves have been involved in illegal wiretapping. Mark DeMarco told the inquiry probing alleged wrongdoing by the Niagara Force Monday. He also said he has evidence of years of wrongdoing by members of the Niagara Force, including the bugging of confidential telephone conversations between prisoners and their lawyers on a special phone at police headquarters in St. Catharines. I have tapes, photographs and documents to back it up, he said. But DeMarco for the second time refused to answer other questions or reveal the identity of an informant he says gave him tapes of police wiretaps. Inquiry investigators accused by witness.
Okay. Well, that's so cute. Zoom close up.
Don't block me with that.
Close up. Whoa! He has sex with little girls. Sorry.
Whoa, hey, none of that pornography stuff. Karla, if you're in the room and you ever see a red light on in the middle of the dark while you guys are having sex, you better suspect something.
It hurts so much. Fucking hurts. It's like everything in my life I did it to myself. I miss you. Karla,
So what's gonna happen from here, Paul? How do you feel about going to jail? No comment.
There's always a reason for your denial. Innocence could be wrong.
List of some of the many books found in the house after Bernardo was arrested: American Psycho, Suffer the Children, Punish the Sinner, Dark Angel, The I-5 Killer. The Ultimate Evil by author Maury Terry, Small Sacrifices, Ritual Abuse, Bitter Blood, The Anarchist Cookbook, Devil Child, and The Confessions of Henry Lee Lucas. Lawyer John Rosen later called the couple's home the Venus Fly Trap. Paul Bernardo had never killed any of his rape victims. 19 documented attacks, no fatalities. No one died until Karla came on the scene. And even then, only when she was directly involved were people killed. The whole arrangements for the trials seem to have been carefully orchestrated by the Canadian authorities. For example, one correspondent writes, "The Crown obtained this publication ban not to protect Paul's right to a fair trial, but in order to keep secret the lack of evidence against him, particulars of the plea bargain with Homolka away from any public scrutiny. If Homolka changes her mind and fails to testify, the Crown prosecutors will probably lose the case against Bernardo." This prompted Ken Murray, Bernardo's first lawyer, to say that the Attorney General made a pact with the devil. Without Karla Homolka's evidence, it is highly probable that Bernardo will get off. The Attorney General decided not to hold a preliminary hearing in the trial of Bernardo. This is a serious departure from standard judicial procedures.
The Crown presumably believed that they needed Karla's evidence in order to get at Paul, and therefore wanted support for the idea of having her as a witness. As a psychiatrist, I have concerns that they supported that through psychiatric evidence that I feel is very lacking in credibility.
Justice was not served.
Everybody said you wouldn't have made the deal with Miss Homolka if you didn't have the videotapes.
Mm-hmm.
Now it looks like she's broken the deal, and you've got the videotapes, don't you?
Yes.
And yet you went ahead and made another deal.
Mm-hmm.
She wasn't needed as a witness anymore.
Yeah.
The Crown says that there's little doubt that she would feel she'd been unfairly dealt with if she'd been charged. Who cares what she thinks?
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you.
What does that say about the Crown's relationship with Karla Homolka?
I don't know. I can't fill you in on that.
Well, you're smiling, but does that disturb you? I mean, you got that letter initially.
Going back to the earlier part of our conversation, did I say I agreed with the advice?
But you didn't charge her, and you could have.
No. Yeah. There is further information that if a charge was laid, it would not be proceeded with.
By the Crown?
By the Crown.
Where's Christy? Christy Blatchford from the Toronto Sun. Have you ever covered anything as remotely horrific as this in your career?
As horrific, but not for such a prolonged period of time. I mean, that was the tough part, I suppose, in this, yeah.
What did you come away from the trial feeling like?
Dreadful, but I mean, tired, emotionally drained, all the things that everybody, I think, involved in it feels, and unsatisfied. I don't blame lawyers for being nervous about the prospect of having politicians try and undo what is done in the court system, deals such as this, but I think what the public is probably owed is some sort of accounting from people in the Attorney General's office, the architects of this deal, just to tell us what their rationale was, to tell us what their thinking was. The only kind of explanation we've ever had came from Ray Houlihan sort of toward the end of the trial, and he wasn't one of the deal makers. I'd like to hear from Murray Siegel and Michael Code, and I think we should.
Murray Siegel is basically the architect of the deal, is he not?
As I suspect Michael Code is too. I believe he was pretty involved, and I mean, perhaps this was a political decision in the end, coming out of the then Attorney General's office, Marion Boyd, and perhaps she should be asked a few questions too. And that's not to say we should undo it, but that we should be told what the hell went on.
Back then, Marion Boyd was the Member of Provincial Parliament for London Centre, Ontario. She is also the Attorney General of Ontario and Minister responsible for women's issues. Boyd is a social worker by trade, a former activist in the militant feminist movement, and was elected in the massive New Democratic Party victory of September 1990. She was named Attorney General in February 1993 by Premier Bob Rae, due to, as Boyd put it in an interview, reasons that were made clear to her in a kind of private discussion between Rae and herself. Persistent rumors during the trial said that Bob Rae was Paul Bernardo's biological father. To this day, no one really knows why Boyd was given the job. She has no law certification, and is not a member of any bar association in Canada. She has publicly stated that the law is not something I've ever been interested in. She is the first non-lawyer Attorney General in Ontario history. Being a member of the NDP, a left-wing socialist party. Her politics are in line with her membership card. She has a history of left-leaning decisions, and letting politics interfere with her functions as Attorney General, most notably in the launching of civil suits against anti-abortion protesters, where there were judicial injunctions and criminal code offenses that would cover any illegal activities they would commit. Among her other recent projects were a separate community-based justice system for African Canadians and her failed same-sex rights bill. Many people feel that, as a militant feminist and lesbian, she cut a special deal with Karla Homolka and manipulated the press to make it seem like Paul Bernardo is the sole perpetrator of the crimes in question. It has come out that police had enough evidence to arrest Bernardo long before Homolka turned him in, and some speculate that Bernardo received some level of police protection during the investigations. What the Bernardo trial covered up and the newspaper ignored is that Bernardo's murders were satanic in nature. They were so horrific that the trial proceedings were made secret. Why was Homolka able to bargain her way out of dangerous offender status? What does she know about the true nature of the videotapes and potentially others involved? Others with the power to influence police investigations and silence witnesses. Bernardo later authorized lawyer Ken Murray to watch the tapes. Sometime later in the month, he rented copying equipment and duplicated the tapes, but did not bill the Ontario Legal Aid Plan, concerned that this would alert the prosecution to the existence of the tapes. On January 11, 1995, CHCH-TV Hamilton reported that police were investigating a U.S. amateur erotic video wholesaler for possible links to the Homolka/Bernardo case. They reported that a tape is for sale entitled Headmistress Karla, showing two disobedient schoolgirls the ropes. Police strangely never completed Bernardo's DNA test until 3 years later when contacted by Niagara police detectives. Even though preliminary tests had shown he was one of the only 5 out of several hundred suspects whose blood type had fit the initial screening test done from semen samples collected from his victims. When his DNA test was finally done, it was a perfect match. On March 29, 1992, Bernardo stalked and videotaped 2 sisters, Shauna and Carrie Patrick, from his car and followed them to their parents' house. The sisters incorrectly recorded his license plate number. One sister reported the incident to Niagara Region Police on March 31, 1992, and was given an incident number should further information develop. With Kristen French under Homolka's guard on April 18, 1992, Bernardo went out to buy dinner and rent a movie. He was spotted by one of the sisters, who attempted to track him to his house. Despite losing him, she got a better description of his license plate and car, which she reported to Niagara Regional Police. This information, however, was mishandled by police and slipped into the black hole to which Judge Archie Campbell would refer in the Campbell Report of 1996, an inquiry into police mishandling of evidence in the case. When Karla Homolka had been photographed by Niagara Regional Police at the hospital on January 6, 1993, she had been wearing a Mickey Mouse watch very similar to the one worn by Kristen French when she was abducted. Dr. Metcalf and Whitefield were to ask Karla about the Mickey Mouse watch. "I always thought there was something shady there," said Old England. "Which, as I said to my daughter, I don't know how the guy pays his rent, $1,000, $1,200 a month, and he never leaves the house."
When Paul Bernardo was alone with numerous victims and had the opportunity, he never killed any of them. The only time that people ended up dead is when Paul was in the presence of his wife. I don't know who did the killing. I do know, however, that women and men are equally capable of doing evil and doing wrong, and that in this particular instance, I'm not so certain that that fact was appreciated.
It was justice served, in your view, in this
Yes.
case. 3 dead girls.
Yes. 3 dead girls.
She could have helped them and didn't.
Yes.
Involved in the death of her sister.
Mm-hmm.
Could have stopped it. Didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Is that justice, what she got?
Well, do you want to talk in terms of retribution? I know I'll be criticized for it, but I do believe that justice was served.
"Everything about this case stinks," said Alan Young, a law professor. St. Catherine's citizens would burn the courthouse if they ever find out what Karla really did. During the trial outside, there was a 2-meter metal sword jutted out from the stone, which was inscribed with the last letter of the Greek alphabet, omega, inside a gold triangle placed before the courthouse. A bright red liquid pooled at the base of the monument. Detective Constable John Stewart of Metro Police Forensic Identification Services took swabs for testing. He said the liquid appeared to be blood. A policeman spokesperson confirmed last night the blood is believed to be from an animal. A man who did not identify himself called the Star to say a group of artists, musicians and sculptors calling themselves a SUV was responsible for the monument. The man said the sword was the sword of justice, and the liquid was tainted blood. A SUV pamphlet scattered around the area said the Office of the Crown Attorney is knowingly cooperating with a confessed sexually violent pedophile in direct contradiction of the needs and desires of the Canadian citizenry. The pamphlet said that evil thrives in silence and encouraged telephone calls to the office and home of Associate Chief Justice Patrick Lesage, who is presiding over the Bernardo trial. During the trial in cross-examination, Carolyn MacDonald asked, "Is there a difference for you between the concept of the occult and Satanism?" "Yes. I believe that the occult is more involved in the spiritual world and doesn't necessarily have to do with the devil," Karla postulated, enjoying her dissertation. Although some people would say that being involved in the occult is being involved in Satan's world. Some people believe that astrology is the devil's work.
Well, at the National Center for the Analysis of Violent Crime, there are experts in serial killings. There's been a lot of public speculation as to whether Kristen's murder is connected to some of the other murders of young women that have occurred in this area during the past year. Now, here is another detail that has troubled investigators. On July 25th, 1991, murdered Burlington teen Leslie Mahaffy was laid to rest in Halton Hills Memorial Gardens on Guelph Line in Burlington. 9 months later, on April 30th, 1992, the body of Kristen French was found along the south side of Side Road number 1, just 1/2 kilometer east of the Guelph Line. Evidence indicated that Kristen's body had not been there long before it was discovered. The choice of Side Road number 1 as a place to dispose of Kristen's body has perplexed investigators. Although this is a rural area, there is a residence relatively close by. However, the choice of this particular area may be significant. Only a narrow green belt separates the site where Kristen's body was found from the grave site of Leslie Mahaffy in Halton Hills Memorial Gardens. Investigation is now underway to carefully analyze and compare other details between the cases of 14-year-old Leslie Mahaffy, who was abducted from Burlington and found murdered in the St. Catharines area, and 15-year-old Kristen French, who was abducted from St. Catharines and found murdered in Burlington.
There are satanic aspects to the Bernardo/Homolka killings that remain largely unknown. For example, Leslie Mahaffy was abducted the evening of the day that she attended a funeral wake for 4 high school friends who had burned alive in a car crash on number 1 Side Road in Burlington. Her body was buried in a cemetery bordering First Side Road. Kristen French was then abducted in St. Catharines, murdered, and her body transported all the way from the city of St. Catharines through the city of Burlington, a ditch on First Side Road, right exactly beside the cemetery where Mahaffy was buried, and not far from where the teens had burned alive in the crash. Ontario Hansard, June 18th, 1991. Last week was a week of mourning in Burlington. Last Tuesday, Christopher Evans, John Newby, Jody Robbins and Scott Granier were all killed when their car went out of control on 1 Side Road between Guelph Line and Walker's Line. 2 days later, Carly McNeil was killed and 4 others injured in a similar accident near Milton.
The night that Leslie disappeared, she had attended a memorial for a young gentleman who was killed in a car accident.
There was a car crash involving 4 teenagers on a road that high school students called Roller Coaster Road. Sadly, all of them died.
And it was a very, very tragic thing to go through, especially considering what was to come.
Hours before she vanished, Leslie had gone to a funeral home to say goodbye to a friend who had been killed in a car crash with 3 other teens.
The road was a popular spot for joyriding, said residents and friends of the teens. Regional Police Staff Sergeant Peter Whitaker said police have never tagged the Strip as a problem area for drag racing or speeding. Everybody's afraid they're going to lose their best friend next, says Paul Bernardo, 17, who knew all 5 of the deceased. It keeps going through your mind. Who's next? Other strange incidents on No. 1 Side Road. Another man driving his pickup truck down the street exactly 1 year to the date June 11th at night. When his truck burst into flames, he swerved off the road into the ditch and was killed as he hit a tree and was thrown through the windshield. The father of the one teenager who died in the burning car committed suicide in the same spot his son died 5 years to the date. Another odd thing about the road is that all the trees along the road seem to be dead. All the trees in the nearby forests are alive and healthy. One old blog, which I can't find anymore, found out that the street was originally a driveway for a farmer who owned all the property in the 1800s. The farmer was accused of killing his wife and daughter. They found the body of his wife, but still to this day never found the body of the daughter. The farmer was convicted and was hanged in the nearby town of Milton. Many people later claimed that the body of the daughter was buried under the road. Could this be the work of an ancient cult in the area? Be aware that Terry Anderson's missing case was also long rumored to be linked to the Bernardo/Homolka killings, as was Nina DeVilliers. Leslie Mahaffy was from Burlington and was last seen in that city. Her concrete-encased body parts were found in Lake Gibson on the outskirts of St. Catharines, just a few miles from where Kristen was apparently abducted. Kristen French's nude body was found on April 30th, Walpurgisnacht/Beltane, 1992, in a ditch several kilometers away on Side Road 1 in Burlington, about 45 minutes from St. Catharines and a short distance from the cemetery where Mahaffy is buried. Bernardo may have been hanging around the memorial service that Mahaffy was attending, knowing that there would be young girls in attendance. He might have even been stalking the funeral home where the dead teens were. People connected to the deaths have been suicided, including Jonathan Yeo, who allegedly committed suicide in police custody after being pursued to a mall parking lot and cornered by police. Yeo was the chief suspect in a pair of killings that have at times been linked to Bernardo, including the murder of teen Laurie Anderson. A military lifestyle fed a violent streak in Jonathan Yeo, say friends who knew him as a teenager. As a youth in the militia, Yeo had ready access to liquor, reveled in macho gunplay, and began experimenting with sex, said Lenore Stairs. I saw a lot of aggression. They learned it was okay to be violent, she said. They all liked playing with guns. It was a turn-on. There was some experimenting with group sex among militia members, and Yeo took part, she said. A 32-year-old factory worker named Jonathan Yeo, who had a history of aggressive, sexually deviant behavior. Yeo worked at DeFasco, a steel mill in Hamilton. Bizarrely, Yeo was living next door to another diabolical figure named John Peter Stark. Stark was the object of a massive, ongoing Metropolitan Toronto police investigation into the disappearance and suspected murder of his teenage daughter's best friend, Julie Stanton. On August 17th, the body of Nina DeVilliers was pulled from a creek in Napanee, very close to where John Peter Stark was now living.
Look who's scared. Look who's scared. You're horrified.
No, I'm not.
You're horrified.
I don't like that.
Rumors surrounding the case from Neil the Trial Breaker. I'll say right now that this is hearsay, but fairly reliable since I am 6th removed. Karla worked in an animal clinic, and Kristen French allegedly did some high school co-op at the same place, thereby becoming familiar with Karla, and that allowed the young girl to be lured to a car in a parking lot. Without Karla's previous relationship with Kristen, old Paul the pervert would have had a much more difficult time getting a young girl into his car, with the concern that existed at that time in St. Catharines. A videotape exists that shows French watching another videotape of Mahaffy being cut to bits from a colleague of counsel for the defense for Homolka's trial. A videotape exists of Paul performing cunnilingus on French's dead, rigor mortis and black-blue body. Karla follows him. Afterward, they both had intercourse with the corpse. Teal cut the tendons of the victims while they were still alive to prevent them from escaping. Maybe this is how the cops were able to link French's death with that of Mahaffy. Despite one of the bodies being cut up, Homolka masturbated with the severed hand of one victim. Some say it was the head. The Teals made French eat all of her hair. Autopsy reports found her innards caked with the stuff. They cut off one of French's fingers and toes each day she was held in captivity. Also, There are reports that a convicted cult murderer in Quebec did similar amputations to his victims. Apparently, part of the delay in the trial had to do with a small contingent of RCMP who traveled to Japan in order to procure Paul Thiel's home snuff videos, which were evidently circulating in the Japanese sex underground. Supposedly, Thiel made some good money from this venture, which is supposed to account for how he could afford a nice home while as an unemployed accountant. Evidently, in these so-called snuff videos, the rooms where the crimes were committed is shown, which is why the police wanted to get a hold of these, so they could get a closer look, and thus search for evidence, DNA, etc., in the areas that were shown. On December 18, 1993, the London Free Press reported a $10 million lawsuit launched against Paul Thiel and his estranged wife by a woman who said she was sexually assaulted by a knife-wielding Thiel, aided and abetted by Karla. The woman, who was 19 when she said she was assaulted on December 22, 1989, had also filed a claim against the owner of the suburban Scarborough apartment building where she said she was attacked. Other possible victims.
He talked about like all of the women that were disappearing.
On November 30th, 1991, 14-year-old St. Catherine's teenager Terry Anderson disappeared without a trace. An elfin blonde, she was a cheerleader and honor student at Lakeport Secondary School. She lived on Linwell Road with her father. Her mother lived out west. At first, the police were skeptical about the father. Terry Anderson's father was rumored to be a big-time drug dealer from an unconventional family. The police reconstructed Terry's movements. That night she had drunk some beer and popped a tab of blotter acid with her friends. She started around 7 p.m. At 9:30 p.m. she was noticeably intoxicated. But by the time Terry went home around midnight, her friends said she appeared to be fine. Her father saw her at their townhouse around 1 a.m. Terry seemed fine to him. When he woke up the next morning, the front door was ajar and she was gone. She was found 6 months later in Martindale Pond. Her death was ruled death by misadventure. If so, where were all her clothes? She had been wearing a leather jacket and tie-up jackboots and tight jeans. These had never been found. Where were they? And why was her t-shirt inside out? Homolka told prosecutors Bernardo had seen Anderson some time before she disappeared November 30th, 1991, according to a summary of an interview obtained by the Toronto Star. He said that he had seen her sitting at the side of the road and he smiled at her, Homolka recalled in the interview. He said something about karma between Terry and him. Mom claims daughter is likely Bernardo victim. Did Bernardo claim another victim? On July 3, 1988, 25-year-old Lois Hannah disappeared after attending a dance in Lucknow, Ontario, about 30 kilometers from Kincardine. Despite several leads, many of them false, Lois Hannah is still missing today. Sources say that a woman also at the dance sat at the same table with Hannah. At that same dance, she lost her purse. Hannah is a former Miss Midwestern Ontario beauty queen and studied fashion at Fanshawe College. In 1993, the woman received a phone call from the police, who informed her that there was some good news and some bad news. The good news was that the police had found her purse. The bad news is that they couldn't give it back to her. They had retrieved it during their 71 days search of Paul Bernardo's house, and it was considered police evidence. Several questions remain unanswered. How did Bernardo come into possession of the woman's purse, and why are the police still holding it? More importantly, what role, if any, did Paul Bernardo have in Lois Hannah's disappearance? The theory is she either was followed home from the dance or someone was watching her home. Over 200 people have volunteered to search for Hannah so far. It's much more than I ever anticipated. The search is taking place because his organization received information that a scream was heard that night in 1988. He says a concession north of where the scream was heard, someone reported seeing a female in a nightgown. Locals wondered if the disappearance of Lois and 22-year-old Lisa Leona Moss that summer were related to serial killer and rapist Paul Bernardo, who had been on vacation in the nearby Owen Sound area. Melinda Shepit, 16, had worked as a sex worker for only 3 weeks when she was killed. Her body was found in a Bywood Market parking lot in September of 1990. She had been strangled. Melinda, a student at St. Patrick's High School, was pregnant at the time of her death. Friends and family said she was confused and unhappy, and a woman who knew her said she was living with her pimp who wouldn't let her come home each night unless she had earned $600. Police interviewed one man for 10 hours but released him. Melinda's friends talked on the condition they remain anonymous. Some because they're terrified the killer will come after them, some because they're embarrassed to be linked with the seamier side of the Bywood market. What they did know was that Melinda was likely lured by the many pimps who hang around local high schools, looking for young girls to take up the trade. The 17-year-old said Melinda was headed south on Dalhousie in a black car. She says she recognized the John beside her. It was 12:30 a.m. One source says that Bernardo matched a description of the suspect perfectly. Cindy Halliday disappeared in April 1992, 4 days after Kristen French was abducted. She was from Barrie, a city north of Toronto, and was last seen hitching a ride at the end of the bus line on Highway 27. Her dismembered remains were later found in a secluded area. She had been stabbed repeatedly. Paul Bernardo often traveled that highway because he had friends who lived in the area and also sold cigarettes to bikers that frequented the area. The Monday she vanished was the day after Paul and Karla murdered Kristen French. Karla Homolka remembers this day because she told police Paul left the house and didn't return for about 24 hours. He never told Homolka where he went. These individuals are only a few of 100 unsolved sex slayings of young women between the ages of 11 and 28 in southern Ontario since the early 1980s. An individual named Frank Perry was murdered 20 minutes from Karla's parents' house on Paul's birthday in 1992. He was a well-known cigarette/alcohol smuggler who was beaten to death in his bed, and his cash box and jewelry was stolen. One of Paul's raps, "I'll drain your brain and take your chain." Check out these odd things about how similar the Paul Bernardo case and James Medley cases were. In both cases, the girls were lured into being abducted by another young girl, helping entrap them. Karla Homolka helped Paul Bernardo lure teen girls in their car, and Christina Sherry helped James Medley lure teen girls in their apartment. In both cases, the girls were confined and tortured. In both cases, videotapes were seized by police. The girls were subjected to abuses that included being forced to drink urine and eat feces. Possession of crack cocaine. Both James Medley and Paul Bernardo had ties to Masonic police organizations. Both are said to have been paid police informants. Check out this eerie picture taken at the Federal Women's Cottage prison known as Club Fed, where Homolka and Sherry are actually close friends, which makes me wonder if they knew each other before prison. Given all the other odd similarities between the two cases, it's not too far a stretch. Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa are all part of the Golden Triangle of narcotics and prostitution in central Canada. Are those hand signals? Sources: Invisible Darkness. The Strange Case of Paul Bernardo and Karla Homolka by author Stephen Williams. Karla, A Pact with the Devil by author Stephen Williams. Lethal Marriage by author Nick Prawn. Deadly Innocence by author Jim Cairns and Scott Burnside. A Marriage Made for Murder by author Brian O'Neill. Bernardo the Scarborough Rapist by author G. Michael Weiss. New World Order: Corruption in Canada by author Robert O'Driscoll and Elizabeth Elliott. Report to the Attorney General of Ontario on certain matters relating to Karla Homolka. Bernardo Investigation Review Report of Mr. Justice Archie Campbell, June 1996. Karla's Web: A Cultural Investigation of the Mahaffy French Murders by author Frank Davey. www.wkh2012.proboards.com.
Say bye-bye. Bye-bye.